Last week we overheard Jesus speaking to the crowds. And this is what he said. "Come to me, all you that are weary and are carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Those are the words that we heard. And in my sermon, I suggested that these words, which were spoken so long ago and in such a faraway place, that they are still quite relevant to us because we carry lots of burdens. As individuals and as a society, we are carrying lots of heavy burdens, lots of different burdens. Burdens of the past, burdens of the future, burdens of safety and security, of education, of work, of an uncertain economy, the burdens of health and health care, the burdens of fear, violence, and injustice. And the list could go on, for we are a weary and heavy-laden people. Now, one of the burdens I highlighted was the burden of our own brokenness. As I said, I hear more and more people talking about the burdens of their own internal judgments. These are people who are trying to show love and kindness, who are trying to make a difference in the lives of others, but they come face to face with their own limitations and their own brokenness. For example, I hear stories of persons who want to help others who are in poverty. But when they engage in this work, they experience all sorts of negative thoughts and emotions. They find themselves annoyed or impatient or filled with judgmental thoughts. They become aware of prejudices they didn't even know they had. And they feel, as one person said, they feel like jerks. And who wants to go around feeling like a jerk? And thus they carry around this burden of shame and guilt over what they perceive to be their own lack of generosity and compassion. And they don't know quite what to do. And it is to such as these that Jesus says, "Come. Come to me, all you who are weighed down. Come to me with all of your impossible burdens, with your shame and your guilt, your judgments, your prejudices. Come to me, and I will give you rest from those things." Okay, but where do we go? Jesus says, "Come to me," but where is Jesus, and how do we find him? Now, I have to admit that at this precise moment in writing my sermon, I had a flash of inspiration. I pulled out my cell phone, opened up Google Maps, typed in Jesus, and hit search. And after a few seconds, I received the following message: "No results for Jesus." Well, I guess that was to be expected, but it was rather disappointing. I mean, wouldn't it have been really cool if it had said, "Sitting at the right hand of God"? You know, and you could click the directions button and know how to get there. But where did we find Jesus? How do we answer that question? Can we find Jesus in our private prayers, in our devotions, in our reading of Scripture? Yes. What about this place? Can we find Jesus in this place? Can we find Jesus at this table? Absolutely. And while these are important places to find Jesus, they're not the only places where Jesus can be found. There are other places where we can find Jesus, other places where we can be found by Jesus. I want to talk about one of those places. In 2003, Jonathan and Leah, a husband and wife, were in Iraq as members of a peacemaking delegation. It was during a time of intense bombing by the Americans. And Jonathan and Leah and some of their group, they were being driven out of the country when their car hit a large piece of shrapnel that was on the highway. went off the road and landed in a ditch. And 3 of their friends were seriously injured. In fact, when they emerged from the car on the side of the road, their heads were bleeding. And they wondered what was going to happen to them. Well, at that moment, a car of Iraqis came by, stopped, picked them up, and took them to the town of Rupa. And in Rupa, a doctor said to them, 3 days ago, your government bombed our hospital, but we will help you. And he saved their lives. It's an amazing story. And as they told this story over and over again, Jonathan and Leah began to realize that this was the story of the Good Samaritan. But it wasn't a Good Samaritan in this case. Instead, it was the story of the good Iraqis, the good Muslims, those who were supposed to be their enemies, who had showed them what the love of Jesus is like in the 21st century. Now, at the end of the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." And so they did. When they returned to the States, Jonathan and Leah moved to Walltown, North Carolina, and they bought a house. They wanted it to be a hospitality house, a place to practice the kind of hospitality that they had received. They called it the Rupa House. And their intention was to welcome everyone as though they were Jesus. In fact, they have a knocker outside their front door, and engraved on the knocker are some words of Jesus from another parable. And it reads, "I was a stranger, and you welcomed me." So now, for over a decade, Jonathan, Leah, and the community at Rupa House have been opening their doors to strangers and to friends of strangers. And in that time, well over 60 people have come to live with them. Jonathan's written a book about it. It's called Strangers at My Door. The subtitle is A True Story of Finding Jesus in Unexpected Guests. In the introduction, Jonathan writes, "We invited folks who were homeless to consider this their home. For over a decade now, they have. They have come here after fleeing abusive partners, and they've come straight from prison, sometimes for a night, sometimes for life. They've shown up scarred by the trauma of war abroad, and haunted by the horrors of violence in homes that fell apart. They've been drug dealers who wanted a fresh start, lifelong addicts who needed a place to die, kids whose families had come undone, street workers who just wanted to sit down and eat a sandwich. And they've brought with them a universe that's every bit as broken as the bombed-out highway in the Iraqi desert. They come here with pressing needs, and they have taught me hope. I believe in the miracle at Rupa, and not just because I lived in the desert of Iraq. I've seen the miracle repeated time and time again right here in my home. A knock comes to our door, and we are saved." In a nutshell, that's the theme of the whole book. A knock comes at our door, and we are saved. Because what Jonathan and Leah and all the other members at Rupa House have discovered is that in their efforts to practice the hospitality of Jesus, in their efforts to be open and to help those who are in need, they find that they are helped. They find that they receive more hospitality than they give. And so, in short, they have learned, they have discovered the two-way street of hospitality. That's the miracle. But we shouldn't romanticize their experience, because there's nothing romantic about it. Hospitality is not easy, even for those who have practiced it intentionally in a community like this. For example, even after 10 years of witnessing miracle after miracle, as strangers come to the house, when the knocking comes, Jonathan doesn't always want to answer the front door. Sometimes the knocking stops him in his tracks, Sometimes he stands there very quietly, silent, half praying that whoever is on the porch outside won't knock again. Of course, we understand this tension. There is a part of us that wants to be as open as possible to whatever God has in store for us. We want to extend hospitality to those God brings into our lives, but sometimes we would prefer not to answer the door. Why? Well, for lots of reasons. We're busy. We have responsibilities. We have things to get done. We're behind. Or we're tired. We just don't feel up to the task. We don't know what will be asked of us and whether we have the resources, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual resources to confront this situation. Or we are afraid because we don't know how to deal with somebody else's pain. We don't know how to deal with our own pain and suffering sometimes. We don't know how to face our own weakness and vulnerability. Those who group a house feel these tensions. And I gather that there are times when Jonathan doesn't go and answer the door. Can't bring himself to do it. But nevertheless, he says, to leave the door locked, to close ourselves off from another person in fear, is to reduce our capacity to connect, to reduce our capacity to love, to be fully human. And so he says, I go to the door because I don't know who I am without this community of the down and out who have trusted me, even when they have no reason to. I go to see who's there because the Jesus I want to know is the Jesus who comes knocking at midnight, bringing his tired and homeless friends with him. But that's a place where Jesus can be found. And that's a place where we can lay our burdens down. It's a great mystery because Jesus says, come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden. And yet it is Jesus who often comes to us, clothed in the garb of those who are weary and heavy laden. Jesus comes to us as poor, hungry, naked, sick, or in prison. Jesus comes to us in these ways, not just because he needs us, but because we need him. When we welcome the stranger in the name of Jesus, when we show hospitality to those who are different than we are, when we seek friendship with those who are carrying heavy burdens, we find that through the grace of God, our own burdens are made lighter. Our judgments, our prejudices, our unconscious biases begin to be transformed. They begin to drop away. And our capacity for love, our capacity for kindness, our capacity for compassion and generosity, especially for the least of these, that capacity increases. This is how Jesus saves us. This is how Jesus sets us free.